So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. And as we read then Yeshayahu the prophet, we layer then the 61st chapter, precisely then with Leviticus the 23rd chapter and chapter 1:8 of Yeshayahu, so then we can understand the returning of the holy cities. This morning, extremely important, there were the numbers of China, and they are extremely high. And China holds 57% of the world's market, making then China the first. And the trade of the Pacific, then they have together the forward motion. We then in the west and also south, the Atlantic, however, it is truly bankrupt. Most of the nations are in trouble. And not only this, but the European Union is stagnated. Whatsoever we can read from Daniel the 11th chapter, as he stated it, very importantly, at the end of the 1,000 years of this seat, as we understand, ended in 2009, and then from then on was the time of the restoration of the holy cities as per the instructions of Yeshayahu. Yeshayahu 1:8 is absolutely bluntly clear as far as what the Creator himself is doing in this earth, and whatsoever he indicated his prophet to speak must be completed. And the situation is somewhat simple, because the first holy city is on the land of Cush, modern Sudan. As we then understand the many intricacies of the holy instructions, then there is the other side of loving the holy instructions and the prophets and the writings, and also the recording of the spring feast. We should love more than these than our own lives. The Messiah himself was the living instruction. He lived and he was the living instruction. When we read as far as the Shilishim, you find then Shaliach Shaul, Shaliach Shimon, you find then Yaakov, and many of the brethren, they lived the holy instructions. They were not bystanders working the entire day and then spending 5 minutes before going to bed reading a chapter or then a sentence or then a line. Some people, they have a tendency, when they read the instructions, they get this understanding all line upon line, precept upon precept. Those were the Greco-Roman ignorant translators, but what we read is a layer after layer. These understandings then combining and synchronizing them. This is what we should strive for. Today's world, everybody wants prosperity. Fine. The world shall have it in such abundance we can not even dream of. Where do we find this information? Revelation. Read it. There is so much of it. If you study the holy instructions and you read Revelation, starting from the prophets, you find yourself then so sick of so much wealth coming during this time of the restoration period. It is truly sickening. But then let's understand the importance of the holy instruction versus then prosperity. Prosperity has its place, but the plus coming from prosperity should be geared towards more knowledge of the holy instructions and then living it out as we should. Now comes the conflict of Romans chapter 7. Many people, they want read the holy instructions, but they don't want to be part of it because it brings trials and tribulations. What is then the character of a person that does only the minimum to maintain some sort of a relation, and then they turn around, they take these meager teachings of the Greco-Romans, already scoundrelized, but they take the minimum of it and then they personalize for themselves. Some people, they do this and they live by this. They think they have some sort of a worth on their own, and they are granted a few portions of the instructions for their own benefit. You can be sure of it, the Creator is truly far away from this kind of situation. It is truly an abomination. What we should be concerned with every time we are prosperous, always having the holy instructions first. And then when the Creator understands and comes a time, then He organizes what you have on benefit of others. But always must be related with the holy instructions. If His hands are on it, then you can be sure of it. He is 100% related with the instructions. Then another topic is what then the Messiah has said regarding the riches of this world. He has stated very plainly, what is then for you if you win the entire world? And at the end of times, because of the lack of instruction, then your soul is then lost. What have you gained? These was then the words of the Messiah, very precisely, very to the point. And then so many people, unfortunately, they base their salvation from their achievements in life. Because a person has a nice home, nice family, nice house, nice this, that, and the other, He doesn't grant them salvation. Why do we say this so precisely? Let's then verify Luke chapter 1:7. Explains then during the time of the autumn feast, found in Leviticus the 23rd chapter from the 23rd verse through the 44th. Then at the end of times, you're going to be giving the relationships. They're going to form families. And then they're going to be doing trade. And they are building. And they are harvesting. And they are planting. And then comes the end and takes them unaware. We are speaking of situations of life of great wealth. So the Chinese system is already, China leads the world with 57% of the world's trade. That's more than half. China leads. And the APEC, the Pacific, they lead along with China. So the world has its focus changed from the West to the Pacific. The Pacific is the hot place of this planet as far as trade is concerned. That's where the wealth of the world comes from. And the wealth spoken of during the time of the Revelation period is precisely related with the Pacific. China leads. Dragonic period. Period of precision because of the computer. And then Daniel the prophet specified very clearly at the end of the 1,000 years of the deceit would be then a peak of knowledge, and then the restoration period would start with this peak of knowledge related precisely with the trade. So then tabernacling should be the focus. Isn't that amazing? The prosperity leads to the instructions. Now some people, they say, well, this truly was a coincidence or a form of reading. But was then Daniel relating himself with the Gentile world mostly? And he was. However, he did understand that the knowledge of trade was for the purposes of instruction. Thus then when the Messiah said, what is it for you then if you gain the entire world and at the end your soul then gets lost? 2 Corinthians 11:4. What does it say? As far as we can read and hear. If any person comes to you and proclaims any other form of Savior other than spoken of by Moses, any other form of salvation is then false. What is the only way of salvation is then through the instructions of Moses, and Moshe himself, Moses, spoke of the promised Messiah, the prophet, and he came and he completed the spring feast as precisely as the prophets indicated it. And we are expecting for the autumn feast. Prior of the end autumn feast, we find ourselves in a very prelude, a very important time of the restoration period. We are then testifying the rise of the end of time prosperity, and most importantly, the returning of the holy cities of the Messiah laid waste from many centuries. For some people, if you speak of prosperity, boy, you get their focus. If you speak of the cities of the Messiah, some people don't even know what it is. At the end, speaking of them both, what then is the very end? What situation is going to save you? You should answer this for yourself. Because when the Messiah was speaking, if you get your mind and your soul involved only with prosperity, then your soul gets lost. However, if you take what you have and you learn instructions and you help other people, you then produce fruit. Prosperity. Revelation. What can we understand of Revelation as far as prosperity? Revelation chapter 8, Revelation 20 gives us a very important glimpse of this period of time. When we speak of merchants of the earth, they are then the people in charge. So let's read a section of what the Creator himself has indicated via the holy instructions, via the prophets, regarding then the merchants of the earth. Because we are reading the way the Creator wants to end this age, and it will be ended as He indicates. That's why then we read what He spoke So then we save our souls, and then we guide other people. 23rd chapter of Yirmiyahu the prophet then speaks of the crowning of the merchants. Speaks of then obviously the Ishmaelites, the influence of the Ishmaelites regarding the merchants. They are providing them with the fuel so then the merchants can do their work, and there is a crowning of it. However, this crowning is related with the turbans. That's why we read in the 62nd chapter of Yirmiyahu and the 37th chapter of Ezekiel the restoration of the stick of the first son of Ibrahim. Truly there is the word crowning, but since we understand we are during the time of the restoration period related with the merchants of the time of the end, it's not truly crowning. It is speaking of the importance of the authority of the Ishmaelites. So then, whose merchants are chiefs, whose traders are weighty on the earth. So then, we truly read these and we understand governments are no longer important, because governments are going to become dependent upon taxes coming from the merchandise, computerized and directly sent to governments as they are sold. Let's then understand the point. Governments of the past, they created their own systems, how they want to be charged, how they want to receive taxes, how they want it to be treated. Those references are changed. This time governments are directly dependent upon the merchants. If they don't work together with the system of the merchants, governments simply don't get their taxes. Why do we say this? Because there is a form of monetary system becoming a whole lot more involved with the merchants, mostly then regarding with investments on products, directly products. And as they receive the earnings from these systems, then they themselves will observe what they can do with their own earnings. Most of it coming through a system not linked with central banks except China, because China leads the world's market. So then, at this point, this form of investment is the only way of removing governments from private sectors. That's why then knowledge shall increase for the purposes of trade. However, have you observed regarding then the kingdoms of the base of the statue of Daniel II? You find then the base of the statue speaking of first, second, and third kingdoms. What do we understand a monetary system coming from these? We understand the monetary system of the Soviet Union, monetary system of China, a monetary system of Africa. From these, what nation is the most powerful as far as trade is concerned? Obviously China. So can you understand what kind of a monetary system are we going to be using? You have to be a genius to understand this point. So Daniel, during his time, he was the very center of his monetary system. What he adopted for Babylon and the other kingdoms he worked under, those were adopted by the nations around him. Thus he became the fourth. So then, merchants of the earth. We understand there is a monetary system directly from China, and then each person can invest on China via many avenues, and one of them is directly on products. China leads with the 57%. So then, as the Pacific has the spotlight at the moment and the other countries are waning away, you find the European Union stagnated, you find the United States stagnated, you find South America stagnated, certain portions of the Western understandings regarding Pacific, for instance Australia and New Zealand, both of them are also improving. Only China and his friends of the Pacific, those are then in charge. Then you find the first transaction and many others as far as what Daniel the prophet has mentioned. The second understanding of this situation is then the change of power from governments given to the merchants. Sometimes it's a bit weird speaking of the merchants. For instance, FedEx, UPS, DHL, and many other freighting companies, Maersk for instance. It's kind of a weird speaking of themselves being in charge, having the powers of a government and above. That's precisely what the instructions are teaching us. Let's then understand a factor. The first king of Babylon. The first chapter we understand he was very strong. Daniel and his friends came from afar, and then the king was very impetuous. During his time, the king had shown strength. When Daniel was given understanding of dreams, and he then specified what the dream was, the whole situation had shifted from the king to Daniel. From then on, never changed. Darius the Mede, we barely hear of him and his personal work in the kingdom. Medes and Persians, we don't hear of these, but we hear of Daniel. Daniel and his system of trade had the spotlight during his lifetime. When we're speaking of then the time of the restoration period, what can we understand as far as Daniel the 11th chapter, the 12th, and then Michechiahu the 24th chapter, and the time of the end, Revelation 8 and 20, and then Yeshayahu chapter 1:8, and the 61st, and Revelation, Galah. That is speaking powers given to the merchants, beyond as we can understand from governments. As people they get in the system and they purchase more, then comes the danger of nations not receiving taxes, because the system of the country is then obsolete, outdated. In many countries they have trouble charging taxes when people purchase overseas. What can we understand? The only resolution is using the existing system of each of those freighters, combining with policies of the government, so then taxes are charged instantly. When the purchase is made and the label is printed, then comes an instant taxation. Why? Because there are monetary systems not linked with central banks. How are the governments going to resolve this? Many nations, they don't have the space, technology, neither people to handle so many packages, so much of the freight coming. So then, what can we expect of governments? There is only a word: despair. Governments are entering despair. Why despair? Because they do understand they no longer have the authority, but they want to do whatsoever is in their power then to maintain the status quo as it was during the time of the 1,000 years of deceit. Some countries, the leaders, they don't even speak the English language used widely. Incredible. For 1,000 years, English was used as the trade language. And some nations, they don't even care. But they must be linked with the system, and they must learn and understand English. Many economies are ruined. Germany, for instance, worked so hard, and then the entire European Union is stagnated. The United States is bankrupt. South America is truly in a very hard place. Only China shines even more. But what these gives us as far as prosperity, and most importantly salvation, people have a tendency always waiting for somebody else. How come those who are the smarties? Have you ever heard of the smarties? They always wait for somebody else, grab the holy instructions and teach. Most of them, they only want to sit back, point a finger, and then mock. And what kind of a fruit these people can produce? They're going to be cut down at the end and burned with the others, because they do not produce fruit. Can church save you? No, church can't save you. What kind of a Savior do they teach? A wanderer in the world. I thought the holy instructions coming from Moses taught a place of the Holy of Holies, directly on top of the Ark of the Covenant. And then the Son that came substituted the Father, and then the Gentiles were included in the plan. So is there a place for the Savior? There is. On the Holy of Holies, that's where He belongs. No place else. So the Savior is with those who are understanding the instructions and teaching other people and showing them. The Savior is not in a world wandering around. As far as we can understand of the system, and how is it going to play out, it is amazing the amount of influence governments they have as far as trade. Now when you speak of China, with the system extremely precise, we then understand more than 50% of the world's trade already in the hands of China. And what kind of a system do they use? Computer. Transactions. And a monetary system exclusive for the work of China. That's how the world gets rich. China has already a system for the entire world. The situation is, it's not yet divulged, because the system of China relates with responsibility, must have trust and maintenance. So then the system continues on, and then other nations can enjoy its benefits. So then, how are the governments going to receive taxes? Can they receive it from their own systems? No, they can't. Because a monetary system is coming where there is no direct link with central banks. And each nation then later on must have a module so you can plug in your computer, such as a card. So when you do trade in certain nations, then you can deduct the taxes instantly when you purchase. Let's then understand what the Messiah has said as far as serving God or saving and then serving money. Can we serve them both? No. Either you are a slave of one and then enjoying the other, or vice versa. You can't do both. And unfortunately, during the time of the Messiah, when he was completing the spring feast, his people were absolutely blind for more money. People were so insistent in wanting more money, the Messiah had to adapt his teachings, and he used monetary related parables, because people were hard-headed. Understanding the holy instructions, this is what we should strive for. If we don't do this, if we don't produce fruit, at the end, straight down. And it's not very nice down there. So please stay tuned. Watch more coming up.